Can you clarify for me when it was exactly that the government decided to stop following World Health Organization medical and scientific advice?
Well, as every stage, we've always looked at the best sort of scientific and medical advice, not just globally, but most importantly, working really closely with Public Health England as making sure that we get the right set of protections, not just in our schools, but right across society. And that's what we've done. And as you've seen in terms of the guidance that we issued when we saw schools coming back for June, and the guidance we issued in early July for schools coming back in September, putting a system of controls there to make sure we do everything we possibly can do to limit any form of spread of the infection, but equally making sure that children have the opportunity to get back to school at the earliest possible stage.
And indeed that children have a reasonable experience in the classroom. However, you and I both know that the advice until yesterday afternoon was that the children in schools in England, primary schools, no face masks, secondary schools also no face masks at all, was not going to be necessary. The advice from the World Health Organization on Friday was that the children from 12 onwards should wear face masks where they couldn't socially distance, where there was a high risk of the virus, in the communal areas, so corridors, canteen and the like. Jenny Harries, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, only yesterday was saying that the evidence wasn't strong and that government policy was not going to change. A few hours later, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, announces that they would become mandatory in school corridors and communal areas for all secondary school pupils in Scotland. Lo and behold, only a few hours after that, the policy in Westminster changed. I don't remember electing Nicola Sturgeon as Prime Minister of this country. Why is she in charge of a face mask policy in England's schools?
Well, she isn't in charge of
Isn't
face
she?
mask policy. And just, I think it's really important we just put some clarification in here, because we don't want listeners to be getting the wrong idea as to what's expected if their children are returning to school. So what we've been clear in saying, and Jenny spoke incredibly eloquently about this just the other day, about actually schools up and down the country, there isn't a need for youngsters to be wearing a face mask. We will be welcoming children back into school. We saw over 1.6 million children back into school before the summer holidays. But what we are looking at doing, what we have issued guidance on, and we've made it clear, in those small number of areas across the country where there are local lockdowns, and actually as you read the World Health Organization advice, what they make clear is that face masks should be just worn in high transmission areas. So when we look at those areas that are in local lockdown, what we're recommending is only in secondary schools, only in local lockdown areas, is that youngsters in communal areas wear a face mask, but not in the classroom.
But that advice was changed last Friday. It didn't change yesterday. The only thing that changed yesterday was Nicola Sturgeon announcing her policy in Scotland.
Yeah, we are sort of living in the midst of a sort of global pandemic, and we're having to sort of deal with unprecedented.
We all accept
matters.
that, and we understand that the science and the medical advice changes. But nothing changed yesterday other than another government U-turn.
But what we have constantly be at pains to sort of express, when that guidance was issued back in May for schools returning in June, we were saying that we'll constantly keep wearing the face coverings under review. We said exactly the same when we issued the guidance back in June for all children coming back in September. And actually, just a few weeks ago, we made the change to ensure that children, when they're getting on dedicated home to school transport, we brought that in line with the rest of the transport system to ensure that they were wearing face coverings when they're on that home to school transport. But we are having to, we will do at every stage everything that needs to be done to ensure that children, as they return back to school, and staff as well, as they return back to school in September, everything that we can possibly do to ensure we create a safe environment for them to learn in and to work in. But this is a small number of secondary schools that are in local lockdown areas. And one thing that's so important for me is that we see all schools opening across the country, not just schools that are not in local lockdown, but schools actually in lockdown areas as
Okay,
well.
no, but we
We
understand that, Secretary State. We understand that. One of the big worries I've got, so I'm very happy for my child to go back to school. I wish the schools had never closed. I'd have sent her in with or without a face mask at any time. However, he was very clear that face masks were not to be worn in schools in England. Crucially, this isn't just about lockdown areas. Head teachers in any secondary school will now have the flexibility. It's up to them, basically, whether they want to introduce face masks in their schools. You know what's going to happen now. We're going to get some very, very anxious parents who haven't left the house in months and months and months, who think it's terribly dangerous for their child to be at school. They're going to want their kids in hazmat suits, to all intents and purposes, and they're going to be putting the pressure. We know those are the sort of parents that constantly haranguing head teachers. Head teachers are going to feel they're going to be blamed if they haven't brought in face masks. We're going to end up with all of our children wearing face masks all of the time when it's simply not necessary for them to do so. It will actually possibly be more dangerous for them to do so. Can't the government stand up and be counted on this and just say, no, we are following the best scientific and medical advice. I'm willing to trust that Chris Whitty knows better than the average anxious mum at my school and says we are not having face masks in schools unless in the exact circumstances of a specific lockdown in a particular area. Why can't you stand up and say that and stand up to the anxious parents and just have a little bit of backbone on this issue?
Well, that is in essence exactly what we are saying.
It's not. You've allowed head teachers to have discretion.
Sorry, I didn't mean to speak across you, Julia.
No, apologies. I interrupted you. You've given head teachers discretion. You shouldn't have done that.
What we've done is we've said to head teachers, if there's specific areas or specific concerns that they feel as if they need to deal with, they have the ability to do that. We've always had in the English system of education a very deregulated system, actually trusting head teachers to show good judgment and leadership within their schools. But we have been absolutely abundantly clear. And, the chief medical officers from all 4 nations in the United Kingdom have made it clear that the overall risk to children from coronavirus in relation to education settings is low, and that the risks associated with not being in school certainly outweigh those of being in school. That's why our complete focus, is ensuring that we welcome back all children. And we don't want to be in a situation where there's certain parts of the country where there are local lockdowns, where people are overly concerned about their children returning. That's why it's so important that we do everything we can. I mean, at every stage, we've tried to take a really careful, cautious approach in terms of welcoming our children back into schools.
And what about the
because
parents?
We want to get them all back.
What about the parents who don't want to send their kids into schools? They think it's too unsafe, with or without face masks. Are they going to face fines?
Well, we've seen a system within this country for many years. Schools, in the first instance, work with those parents, talk with those parents, try and deal with issues or problems that they maybe have. But it's really important. We do have compulsory education in this country. It's absolutely vital for every child to receive an education. And that's why we've always had a system of fines that is only used in the most extreme cases where it's not able to be resolved by discussion.
Okay, a little bit earlier we were talking with a former Education Secretary, Damien Hinds, about the Ofqual Chief Executive, Sally Collier, who she resigned yesterday over the A-level and GCSE grading fiasco. Does this mean this was entirely Ofqual's fault and you've got no blame whatsoever?
Well, I'd like to sort of thank Sally for all the work that she's done and commitment she's shown to not just this role, but many other roles over a long period of time in the public sector. But, it was very much Sally's decision and working with Ofqual. And our focus is absolutely in making sure that we deliver the exam series for those youngsters who want to take an exam, who weren't satisfied with their grade in the autumn, but also putting the plans in place to be able to ensure all youngsters are able to take exams in the summer of next year.
Well, this is a crucial thing. Year 11 pupils starting this September and Year 13 pupils for their GCSEs and their A-levels. They don't know right now whether or not those exams are going to take place. They don't know if they're going to have their grades decided by an exam, by coursework, by their mock exams, when those mock exams will be, what the grading system will be. Are you going to match the grades of these pupils who are, let's face it, overmarked this year, or are you going to go back to normal grading? Have you decided any of this?
Well, as you'll have already seen, we've been quite clear that we are moving back to a system of examinations for the summer of next year for both GCSEs and A-levels. We think that's really important. The best form of assessment is always exams.
What if they can't take place?
But we are putting into place, we are going to be putting in place additional protections, because obviously it is a global pandemic and we can't ever predict exactly what's going to happen. But, I really welcome Ofqual's announcement about Dame Glenys Stacey to assume the temporary leadership role as acting chief regulator. Glenys was the chief regulator at Ofqual, and we look forward to working with Glenys and the whole of the team at Ofqual to put these things in place for the coming academic year.
A very highly respected academic. But crucially, do we not think that before children go back to school, before they start this crucial year 11 and year 13, bearing in mind they've already lost months and months of their education for the 2 years they should be preparing for those exams, that they should know how they're going to be marked? If they can't take their exam, how are they going to be marked? Is every single school going to have a mock exam that's going to be externally vigilated so that they can use those results and rely on them? Is it going to be course-based? How do we not need to tell kids how they're going to be judged at the end of this year before they start it?
Julia, as you well know, that Ofqual do a whole set of actually public consultations about this. What we'll be doing is working with the sector in terms of making sure that we bring the full exam series back into the summer. The best form of assessment is exams. Yep. That's why we're going to be going back to exams. I think that it's fair to say there isn't much enthusiasm in this country for moderated results, and there are and will always be sort of some challenges in terms of teacher assessments as well.
OK, we'll leave it there. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson, thank you very much for joining us.